growled Theodore like a great boy. I'm hungry. Starved. I never eat before playing. Kurt Stein, Theodore's manager, had been hovering over him solicitously. You must remember tomorrow night. I should advise you to rest now as quickly as possible. He, too, glared at Fenger. Fenger fell back almost humbly. I've great news for you. I must see you Sunday, after this is over. I'll telephone you. Don't try to come to work tomorrow. All this in a hurried aside to Fanny. Fanny nodded, and moved away with Theodore. Theodore leaned back in the car, but there was no hint of relaxation. He was as tense and vibrant as one of his own violin strings. It went, didn't it? They're like clods, these American audiences. It was on the tip of Fanny's tongue to say that he had professed indifference to audiences, but she wisely refrained. Gad, I'm hungry. What makes this Fenger hang around so? I'm going to tell him to keep away some day, the way he stares at you. Let's go somewhere tonight, Fan, or have some people in. I can't sit about after I've played. Olga always used to have a supper party or something. All right, Ted. Would you like to go to the theater? For the first time in her life she felt a little whisper of sympathy for the despised Olga. Perhaps, after all, she had not been wholly to blame. He was to leave Sunday morning for Cleveland, where he would play Monday. He had insisted on taking Mizzi with him, though Fanny had railed and stormed. Theodore had had his way. She's used to it. She likes to travel, don't you, Mizzi? You should have seen her in Russia, and all over Germany, and in Sweden. She's a better traveler than her dad. Saturday morning's papers were kind but cool. They used words such as promising, uneven, overambitious, gifted. Theodore crumbled the lot into a ball and hurled them across the room, swearing horribly. Then he smoothed them out, clipped them, and saved them carefully. His playing that night was tinged with bravado, and the Saturday evening audience rose to it. There was about his performance a glow, a spirit that had been lacking on the previous day. Inconsistently enough, he missed the antagonism of the European critics. He was puzzled and resentful. They hardly say a word about the meaning of the concerto. They accept it as a piece of music, Jewish in theme. It might as well have been entitled Springtime. This isn't France or Russia, said Fanny. Antagonism here isn't religious. It's personal, almost. You've been away so many years you've forgotten. They don't object to us as a sect or a race, but as a type. That's the trouble, Clarence Hale says. We're free to build as many synagogues as we like, and worship in them all day if we want to. But we don't want to. The struggle isn't racial anymore, but individual. For some reason or other, one flashy, loud-talking Hebrew in a restaurant can cause more ill feeling than 10,000 of them holding a religious mass meeting in Union Square. Theodore pondered a moment. Then here each one of us is responsible. Is that it? I suppose so. But look here. I've been here 10 weeks, and I've met your friends, and not one of them is a Jew. How's that? Fanny flushed a little. Oh, it just worked out that way. Theodore looked at her hard. You mean you worked it out that way? Yes. Fan, we're a couple of weaklings, both of us, to have sprung from a mother like ours. I don't know which is worse, my selfishness or yours. Then, at the hurt that showed in her face, he was all contrition. Forgive me, sis. You've been wonderful to me, and to Mizzi, and to all of us. I'm a good-for-nothing fiddler, that's all. You're the strong one. Fenger had telephoned her on Saturday. He and his wife were at their place in the country. Fanny was to take the train out there Sunday morning. She looked forward to it with a certain relief. The weather had turned unseasonably warm, as Chicago Octobers sometimes do. Up to the last moment she had tried to shake Theodore's determination to take Mizzi and Otti with him, but he was stubborn. I've got to have her, he said. Michael Fenger's voice over the telephone had been as vibrant with suppressed excitement as Michael Fenger's dry, hard tones could be. Fanny, it's done. Finished, he said. We had a meeting today. This is my last month with Haynes Cooper. But you can't mean it. Why, you are Haynes Cooper. How can they let you go? I can't tell you now. We'll go over it all tomorrow. I've new plans. They've bought me out, do you see? At a price that, well, I thought I'd got used to juggling millions at Haynes Cooper, but this surprised even me. Will you come? Early? Take the 8:10. That's too early. I'll get the 10. The mid-October country was a lovely thing. Fanny, with the strains of Theodore's debut and leave-taking behind her, and the prospect of a high-tension business talk with Fenger ahead drank in the beauty of the wayside woods gratefully. Fenger met her at the station. She had never seen him so boyish, so exuberant. He almost pranced. "Hop in," he said. He had driven down in a runabout. "Brother get off all right?" "Gad, he can play. And you've made the whole thing possible." He turned to look at her. "You're a wonder." "In your present frame of mind and state of being," laughed Fanny, "you'd consider any one a wonder. You're so pleased with yourself you're fairly gummy." Fenger laughed softly and sped the car on. They turned in at the gate. There was scarlet salvia now to take the place of the red geraniums. The gay awnings, too, were gone. "This is our last week," Fenger explained. "It's too cold out here for Katherine. We're moving into town to morrow. We're more or less camping out here with only the Jap to take care of us." "Don't apologize, please. I'm just grateful to be here after the week I've had. Let's have the news now." "We'll have lunch first. I'm afraid you'll have to excuse Katherine. She probably won't be down for lunch." The Jap had spread the luncheon table on the veranda, but a brisk lake breeze had sprung up, and he was busy now transferring his table from the porch to the dining room. "Would you have believed it," said Fenger, "when you left town? Good old lake. Mrs. Fenger coming down?" to the man. The Jap shook his head. "Nossa." Their talk at luncheon was all about Theodore and his future. Fenger said that what Theodore needed was a firm and guiding hand. A sort of combination manager and slave driver. An ambitious and intelligent wife would do it. That's what we all need. A woman to work for and to make us work. Fanny smiled. "Missy will have to be woman enough, I'm afraid. Poor Ted." They rose. "Now for the talk," said Fenger. But the telephone had sounded shrilly a moment before, and the omnipresent little Jap summoned Fenger. He was back in a minute, frowning. "It's Haynes. I'm sorry. I'm afraid it'll take a half hour of telephoning. Don't you want to take a cat nap, or stroll down to the lake?" "Don't bother about me. I'll probably take a run outdoors." "Be back in half an hour." But when she returned he was still at the telephone. She got a book and stretched luxuriously among the cushions of one of the great lounging chairs, and fell asleep. When she awoke Fenger was seated opposite her. He was not reading. He was not smoking. He evidently had been sitting there, looking at her. "Oh, gracious! Mouth open?" "No." Fanny fought down an impulse to look as cross as she felt. "What time? Why didn't you wake me?" The house was very quiet. She patted her hair deftly, straightened her collar. "Where's everybody? Isn't Mrs. Fenger down yet?" "No. Don't you want to hear about my plans now?" "Of course I do. That's what I came for. I don't see why you didn't tell me hours ago. You're as slow in action as a Chinese play. Out with it." Fenger got up and began to pace the floor, not excitedly, but with an air of repression. He looked very powerful and compelling, there in the low-ceilinged, luxurious room. "I'll make it brief. We met yesterday in Haynes's office. Of course we had discussed the thing before. You know that. Haynes knew that I'd never run the plant under the new conditions. Why, it would kill every efficiency rule I've ever made. Here I had trimmed that enormous plant down to fighting weight. There wasn't a useless inch or ounce about the whole enormous billionaire bulk of it. And then to have Haynes come along, with his burdensome notions and his socialistic slop. They'd cripple any business, no matter how great a start it had. I told him all that. We didn't waste much time on argument, though. We knew we'd never get together. In half an hour we were talking terms. You know my contract and the amount of stock I hold. Well, we threshed that out, and Haynes is settling for $2.5 million. He came to a stop before Fanny's chair. $2.5 million what?" asked Fanny feebly. "Dollars." He smiled rather grimly. "In a check." "One check?" "One check." Fanny digested that in her orderly mind. "I thought I was used to thinking in millions. But this I'd like to touch the check just once." "You shall." He drew up a chair near her. "Now get this, Fanny. There's nothing that you and I can't do with $2.5 million. Nothing. We know this mail order game as no two people in the world know it. And it's in its infancy. I know the technical side of it. You know the human side of it. I tell you that in 5 years' time you and I can be a national power. Not merely the heads of a prosperous mail order business, but figures in finance. See what's happened to Haynes Cooper in the last 5 years. Why, it's incredible. It's grotesque. And it's nothing to what you and I can do, working together. You know people, somehow. You've a genius for sensing their wants or feelings or emotions. I don't know just what it is. And I know facts.